Okay, good afternoon. My name's Emma Ferranti. I work in civil engineering at the University of Birmingham. Our session today will be 3 presentations from the university talking about our outputs from a large collaborative research project called WMAIR. WMAIR was conceived to support local organisations in improving air quality. So without any further ado, I will pass over to Kat, then James, then Sarah, and then afterwards we will take questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emma. I'm Kat Muller. I'm the project manager of the WMAIR project. This is quite a different audience to what we're normally used to. Working at a university, we're used to quite academic audience, so being in this environment is very different for us today. So I'm going to tell you a bit about our highlights from our project. We've also got a project called WM Net Zero, which I'll mention at the end, and then I'll pass on to our 2 Impact Fellows to tell you a little bit more about some of the tools that they've been working on. So just to set the scene, air pollution is the largest environmental health threat in the UK. In the West Midlands, we've got the worst air quality outside of London, affecting 2.9 million people, causing reducing life expectancy by up to 6 months, and with economic costs around £860 million a year. So the 2 pollutants that we're mostly interested in is nitrogen dioxide, so NO2, and particulate matter. NO2 is mainly from transportation, whereas the particulates are from domestic burning, also from industry, but also from transportation as well. And that has underpinned our work on the WMAIR project. So we wanted to do some work to try and tackle this in the West Midlands. So we are a £5 million Natural Environment Research Council funded project. We are working with a number of different stakeholders across the region, from local authority right up to public and private companies. So I've put some of our stakeholders and partners on the screen. The idea is that we're using our environmental expertise to try and tackle air pollution across the region, and to try and look at some of the health and economic impacts related to that. So just to start off with, so we began the project by improving our observations of air quality and emissions across the region, just so that we improved our understanding of the issue. We also developed then a number of models, and some of the models and tools will be talked about a bit later on. And we then looked at working with all our stakeholders to try and apply these tools that we've developed for the region. So what I wanted to talk to you today about is some of the highlights of those applications, so some of those case studies that we've worked on with our stakeholders. So the first piece of work, and probably one of our key case studies, is a piece of legislation that we worked on with the West Midlands Combined Authority. So we were approached by the new head of the environment back in 2021, who had been tasked with doing more for air quality across the region. There was a recognition that actually air pollution goes beyond just transport, and she didn't have a background in air pollution, so she kind of came to us. She didn't have a team of staff to work on this either, so she approached us and asked for our help. So together we co-developed an options paper, which is a scoping piece of work to look at the different options that we could do for the region. And that morphed into an air quality framework, and we worked on that framework with all the local authorities across the West Midlands, so they all had input into that piece of legislation. So the framework itself was launched in November last year, and since then we've managed to obtain some money from DEFRA to start looking at some of those priorities. So we've improved our monitoring capabilities across the West Midlands to look at areas that are lacking the monitoring, but also to focus on areas of the West Midlands where air pollution exposure is quite high. So we really want to tackle and focus on some of those particular regions. We've also done quite a lot of work with the local authorities directly. As part of the work, we developed a very high-resolution model of air quality across the West Midlands. And these maps just show the business-as-usual maps from 2021 for NO2 and PM2.5. And these are really useful for looking at pollution between areas where we have the monitoring, and also to identify the hotspots that might exist across the region. They're also quite useful for running hypothetical scenarios. So a couple of examples here. So the council wanted to do a bit of work around their transport planning. So we ran some scenarios looking at traffic reduction. So what would happen if we reduced traffic from 10 to 90%? How does that have an impact on pollution across the region? So it allows them to look at particular parts of the network. We also did a piece of work for the West Midlands Combined Authority where we looked at the impact that existing net zero policies would have on air pollution across the region. So on the left-hand side here, we've got the models that were run covering a sort of broad range of net zero policies. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the impacts of air pollution from a transport-only scenario. So essentially, that's increasing the number of electric vehicles across the region. Now, obviously, for this one, there's a big impact on NO2 because the tailpipe emissions are reduced. However, for PM, because you still get emissions of particulates from brake and tyre wear, it has less of an impact. We've also done some work with healthcare settings. So we've worked with University Hospitals Birmingham to assess their clean air hospital framework. So that involved doing some air quality monitoring at a couple of hospital sites, both before and after they implemented some of the suggestions that we made around their air quality framework. And as a result of that work, we produced a guidance note that we sent out to all West Midlands trusts who were also considering air quality interventions at their sites, and that's also available on our website. We've also had quite a lot of involvement with sport, and I think perhaps when we first wrote this application, we didn't realise quite how much involvement in the kind of sports area that we'd have. But because we had the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham in 2022, it gave us an opportunity to work with them on their sustainability strategy. So they went with an all public transport approach to the Commonwealth Games, and this was at the time primarily focused around carbon and climate change. But we came along and said, well, obviously there are co-benefits for air quality, and this was the first time that air quality was actually considered at a Commonwealth Games. So we also did some operational work. So we provided them with daily air quality reports, which they fed into some of their planning of endurance events. And we did a lot of public engagement at the athletic stadium. One thing that was also quite interesting is we developed a policy causation tool for air pollution. So basically this tool, it strips out things that might be having an impact on air quality, such as weather or other factors such as the clean air zone in Birmingham, and it looks at the impact of purely the event that was taking place. So we had a look at the impact of the Commonwealth Games, and actually the impact was quite minimal, which for an event of that size was quite a big achievement. On the back of that, we were approached by Birmingham County Football Association, who represent all football clubs across the region. They were starting a new sustainability strategy, looking at their players' travel to and from the matches. And again, this was focused on carbon, but having seen the work we'd done with the Commonwealth Games, they approached us to expand that work to air quality, particularly recognising that obviously air quality and air pollution has an impact on their players themselves, being a local issue. So we had a look at air quality across the grounds, and perhaps unsurprisingly, as most of them are in urban areas, over half were exceeding health-based air quality guidelines. And we also had a look at the emissions that were generated from players travelling to and from their matches. And we found that on average it accounted for roughly 20% of their individual total road transport related emissions each year. So any sort of interventions that they suggest, so using active travel, public transport, and also lift sharing was a big part of their sustainability strategy, will have an impact also on air pollution. Just to finish off, we have, if you want to find out anything else about the work we're doing or anything more about the highlights that I've just mentioned, we have a number of resources on our website and a number of briefing notes that we've produced. And finally, just to finish off with, as I've mentioned, there's a lot of co-benefits with net zero when it comes to air pollution. And we've got a new Wellcome Trust funded project that is focused on that. So we're looking at existing net zero policies across transport, health and energy. And we're going to look at the co-benefits or impacts on air quality and linking them with health outcomes via air pollution, indoor air pollution, and things like physical activity. So that's everything from me, and I'll pass over to James.
Okay. Thank you,
Thanks, Kat. Fantastic summary of all the work we've been doing over the past few years. So I want to talk to you today about the Air Quality Life Assessment Tool. So as principally the lead for the development of this tool, my name's James Hall and I'm a research fellow in health economics. So a little bit different to the rest of the team who predominantly were geographers. I kind of came into the project and wanted to look about what's the actual implications here of all of this stuff we're doing about air pollution. What's the implication for health? Because we think that's the primary focus here with air pollution. Yes, it's bad, but why is it bad? It's bad because it hurts us, it harms our health. Next slide, please, Kat. So Kat's already mentioned some of these statistics and facts to you, but essentially we think around 26 to 38,000 deaths every year in England result from air pollution. So that's a heck of a lot of deaths. And principally, when we're thinking about mortality, we're primarily concerned with particulate matter, and particularly small particulates, the ones that get inside your lungs. Okay, they come from industry, domestic combustion, road transport, and manufacturing primarily. Next slide, please, Kat. Interestingly, a couple of years ago, the government reviewed the legal legislation regarding air quality, okay, and set a target of 10 micrograms per cubic metre for particulate matter 2.5. In the same year, the WHO reviewed their guidance and asked what might be a safe limit for human health. Firstly, they said there isn't a safe limit, okay, but what they recommended countries aim for is 5 micrograms per cubic metre. Okay, so there's a gap there between the current UK legal guidance and what the WHO are advocating for healthy air quality. Our work using the tool that I'll show you in a minute showed that actually if we could hit the WHO air quality guidelines instead of the legal guidelines, we'd actually save over 10,000 deaths over 2 decades just in the West Midlands. Okay, next slide please, Kat. Okay, so you've already seen these slides here. These are some of the maps, the outputs from our project, looking at the distribution of PM2.5 and NO2 in the West Midlands. So primarily, the highest areas of mean concentration are in the centre of our cities, okay, where a lot of people live, particularly around Birmingham and Sandwell. Next slide, please, Kat. Now, we've mentioned the disease, we've mentioned the mortality associated with air pollution, but there are broader downstream consequences as well. So talking about more healthcare usage, more social care usage, okay? Economic costs to society from time off work. Okay, so these costs are borne by us all, not just in terms of our health, but also in terms of the broader economy. Next slide, please. Kat mentioned to you the work that we're planning to do next on net zero, okay? We think that the problems of air pollution are going to be exacerbated by the increase in temperatures that we're expecting over the next 2 decades. Okay, so there's a problem related to air pollution, potentially exacerbated by the increased temperatures. And that's because people get sicker when they experience poor air quality in hotter temperatures. Okay? In addition to that, we've also got additional health effects of climate change to think about as well, like deaths from extreme heat, flood-related challenges and food security. Okay, so we're going to face big problems in coming years related to air quality and climate change. Now, if we relate this back and we think about the housing sector, we know that roughly 6 million homes due to be built in England in the next 20 years, okay, as per current housing targets, that should say 300,000 annually. The WMCA itself has set this target of 215,000 homes by 2031. And so we face challenges here. We're going to build all these homes, but we've still got poor air quality. We're expecting bigger challenges from increased heat. How do we build all these homes, but ensure that these places are still livable in terms of access to green space and physical activity, etc.? And so as a team, our advice is that ideally housing should be built in areas with lower existing health harms. Okay, so we have the maps that I'll show you in a minute of the health harms from air pollution. Okay, so it doesn't make sense to be building homes per se in areas that we know already have high health harms, because you're importing people into areas that they're going to get sick. Now, obviously, this isn't always possible, and obviously there's development of brownfield sites, etc. So where it's not possible, housing should obviously include targeted measures to protect those with the highest existing air pollution-related health burden. So we can think about air pollution targeted measures, but also addressing this problem of extreme heat as well. So we're still building a lot of homes in the UK that are not resilient to high temperature. But we know in the next 2 decades there are going to be far more instances of extreme temperature events. And so our work here really, if you turn over to the next slide, Kat, our work is just a simple tool. You can plug in the area that you live in, and it will come up and it will tell you all kinds of data. Okay? It will tell you how many cases of disease currently are in the area you're interested in looking at, how many deaths, what's the NHS costs of air quality, what's the social care costs, all these different things. And using the outputs from these tools, next slide, Kat, we can come up with maps to show the geographical representation of the health burden of air quality. So here we see, particularly around Birmingham and Sandwell, we have a lot of mortality attributable to poor air quality. Whilst out in Solihull, they're a bit more lucky, and about 33% less mortality attributable. Move on, slide. We can also do the same thing with the disease burden, and again we see a very similar pattern with higher levels of disease attributable to poor air quality around the centre of our cities and better towards Solihull and the southwest of the region. Okay, so modelling the disease-related air quality burden is more informative than the air pollution concentration maps alone, okay, because it considers the age structure of the population, demographic characteristics, deprivation, existing vulnerabilities within those areas. Okay, so these maps can help understand not only how bad the air quality is, but also how vulnerable the people are there to poor air quality. Okay, so that's our tool. It's freely available. At the moment, it's only available for the West Midlands, but we are already working on expanding the tool out to Oxford, and we have interest from other areas in the UK at the moment. So we're working on trying to get this kind of analysis done for other areas of the UK. I think that's it.
Thanks, James. Great. So moving on to the next presentation, that's mine. My name is Sarah Greenham. I am an Impact Fellow at the University of Birmingham in the Department of Geography. And today I'm going to talk about how I've been working as part of the WMAIR project to embed climate adaptation within local authority and combined authority processes. So I thought I'd actually start with the end, so where we're at the moment. So I'm just going to describe a journey of mapping where we have started with pulling together lots of information for Birmingham and how that has now progressed to working with the West Midlands boundary with the West Midlands Combined Authority. So the story begins in Birmingham. About 10 or so years ago, we've had a lot of work going on at Birmingham City Council and also at the university, where we've been doing lots of research to identify where vulnerable areas are to lots of environmental hazards. The Birmingham City Council itself has also been doing a great deal of work as part of its redevelopment programme to develop a city of nature where the green spaces take priority, and it's really good for the environment and good for health, as been mentioned. And at the same time, the university was looking at some heat research, and the Birmingham City Council was looking at environmental justice mapping. So it just made sense that when you look at all these together, all this research is trying to achieve the same goal, which is to address climate risk and vulnerability and how decision makers at local authorities and the regional authorities can do something about it. So that is where WMAIR comes in. We were approached by Birmingham City Council to pull this work together to create a combined climate risk and vulnerability assessment map that would help the decision makers and the planners and the geospatial planners and design teams at Birmingham City Council. So the piece of work that we worked on was the key aim to develop a prototype toolkit that enables practitioners to evaluate the effects of climate change on new or existing developments. And this was through a lot of different ways we approached this. We had a key prioritization of open data, so a lot of data that we have used is currently completely free and publicly available to use. So another local authority could also do this at another scale that they so wish. The work has been co-designed with Birmingham City Council, so I've been working really closely with the planners at Birmingham City Council as well as the geospatial team to make sure that they can take on this work going forwards. A key part of this work was that Birmingham City Council submit to the Carbon Disclosure Project, which is a charity that helps with transparency on global climate action. So part of this deliverable then was fed into that submission. And I think a very important part is that it is an MVP. We call it MVP, minimum viable product. It is the minimum things that should be combined together to create something that has some effect and impact and meaning for a local authority. And we hand this process over to Birmingham City Council to impact their capabilities, to help them improve their abilities to do this without the support of the academics like ourselves. And we're being as transparent as possible with our methodology, and you should be able to access these resources to be able to build your own maps. We like to describe the process as choosing the fillings and making the burger. So we've been talking about our methodology as a burger recipe. So you choose your data sets, they're your fillings, you pull them all together, run a few processes, and then it creates your final output, which is your burger. We have published this method, which is openly accessible. You may download the QR code to have a look at it. And anyone should be able to do a similar process with the same data sets that we have used. So the outputs for Birmingham look a bit like this at the moment. So we have used all the data, compiled everything to 100-meter grid squares, and we've scored all the data set layers into a standardized structure, so you can find quite clearly where the highest and lowest relative risk for the region is. And then you can use those outputs to then aggregate to boundaries of use or importance, so for Birmingham City Council or for any local authority at some more neighbourhood levels, which low super output area or electoral wards. You can just very clearly see where the areas of focus should be for developing or addressing higher climate risk. There's been some great outcomes so far of this work for Birmingham. So the geospatial team have been working on an automated process to just feed in any data when it's updated, to update this map as and when required. We have also had this data published on a public-facing site on Birmingham City Council's website, which you can download, or you can view it on this code. And the biggest and the best thing we've discovered so far is that the submission of the CRVA, we call it the Climate Risk Vulnerability Map, has enabled Birmingham to make the A-list for the Carbon Disclosure Programme, where their previous submissions had always been at B grade. So this has been a real momentum push to help them improve their addressing climate risk and their transparency as a local authority, and gives them a stronger standing in the international field. West Midlands Combined Authority have then since approached us about the CRVA for Birmingham and said, could you maybe have a look at this for the West Midlands as a whole? So we are now working with them at the moment, and I'm going to show you some of the processing changes that we've done to make this a little bit more refined and how we've expanded it for the West Midlands. So our MVP1, working with Birmingham, had 11 data sets, so 11 burger fillings to make the map. And you can see that we've got air pollution, air quality layers, flood risk, temperature, and then green space, tree canopy cover, as well as building form, height and density, and then some social factors such as excess years life lost and indices of multiple deprivation. So we've got a combination of socioeconomic and environmental, geophysical layers that all come together to form this map. How we've developed this further for the West Midlands is used a few more data sets and made it a little bit fancier. So we have now split out the data, added some more vulnerability data, and added some exposure data. This has been with the thanks of a lot of new census data from 2021, which is a little bit more refined in resolution and has given us a greater understanding of the aspects of social vulnerability, which is what the West Midlands Combined Authority were trying to find out of the work that we were doing. And then when you sum these layers up through the process of our burger recipe, and then you multiply your hazard by your vulnerability, by your exposure value, you get a total risk layer. And this is what it looks like at the moment. So these are still draft to be refined, but we have the same outputs at the same resolution as we had for Birmingham, so 100-meter grid square, and then at a lower super output area, and then at electoral ward. And as you can see, the distributions are quite similar to Birmingham, but they're a little bit more refined. Now what's next is those maps this coming Saturday are being presented to a West Midlands citizens panel, where they're going to give us an indication of how useful they might be and how we might want to improve them a little bit further to help the population. We are then looking with West Midlands Combined Authority with where they will host these outputs in the public realm, so anyone can have a look at them. We will then be handing over the methodology process to the West Midlands Combined Authority with the support of Birmingham City Council to ensure that they can update these layers as more data is provided over time. And then we will work with, that's it, map updates at intervals. Yes, so when the data sets are updated and they can update the process, they have the capacity and the ability to be able to work this in further to help them with their planning and climate resilient design. And And I will end it from here from myself, and just would like to acknowledge on behalf of WMAIR team and as well for the AQ Lab with James, all the stakeholders that have been really heavily involved in all of the project work that we've been doing, and the funding that we have received to be able to do this work. So thank you very much, and I will hand back to Emma.
Okay, thank you very much. Shall we give everybody a clap? I love having a microphone. It brings out like the inner compere in me. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed our presentations. I thought they were excellent. Our presenters also kept to time excellently, which means we now have about 10-15 minutes for questions. So don't be backwards in coming forwards. I'm going to take the gentleman at the back. I think we have to share.
Hi, Anthony Bodo, former Birmingham Geography graduate. Woo. So I work in West Yorkshire, and the thing that interests me is this model. How applicable or how replicable would it be? What kind of data do you need to produce that 100 square metre model? 100 metre model, sorry. 100, yeah.
That's a great question. So most of the data sets we've used are available at national level, so you should be able to run the similar maps. So we've used data that's available from DEFRA, the ONS and Census, so it should be everything that's available at a national level that you then should be able to scale down. Yes, yeah, the methodology is open access as well, so you should be able to view it and replicate it.
Okay.
I'm wondering to what degree something like specifically the built environment might actually impact these maps, because obviously we're talking a lot about transport, which is obviously really good, but I'm wondering whether it takes into account energy use by buildings or particulates that come from paints, etc. I don't know whether those are involved in any way.
Are you talking about the air pollution exposure maps? Yeah. Does anyone want to take that question?
I'm not sure in terms of what's generated by the buildings, for example, but I know that Jan's model, for example, the air quality model, does take into account the morphology of the area and how it kind of, how pollution plumes are filtered through the buildings. I'm not the modeller, so I don't know the ins and outs of the other aspects. I don't know if...
I think when we're thinking about climate adaptation, one of the vulnerability factors is housing stock and the quality of housing stock. And so if you're living in a home that has high levels of mold, or within an area which is has higher levels of socioeconomic deprivation, then this raises your vulnerability.
And just to add to that, the Net Zero project that I talked about, as part of that, we are putting in indoor air quality monitors in an area of Dudley in a Net Zero neighbourhood. So we're hoping we'll get a lot more information from that could potentially feed into some of our model adaptations.
I mean, I guess it's worth just adding as well that the air pollution maps that you've seen today are modelled, so they're produced by a modelling simulation, but they're fed by air quality data from sensors. So if there are air pollutants around the sensors that are feeding into poor air quality, they will get picked up by the sensor data that feeds the model.
I guess similarly, kind of to the last question, is one of the first things you mentioned was that air pollution goes beyond just transport. So what are some of those things, and do you plan on investigating them further at all?
Yeah, so he's asking about different sources of pollutants. So one of the main strands of the work that we've done we haven't presented today has been actually directly investigating the sources of particulates in the West Midlands. Okay, so one of our research strands has gone away and done chemical analysis of particulates in the West Midlands, and what we found from that analysis is that most of it is coming from road transport, domestic combustion, and industrial and I'm trying to think, sea salt, I think. Yeah. So primarily about 3/4 is coming from those kind of sources. But we have a paper coming out on that in the next month or so, hopefully. So yes, that work is going on, and that's also fed into the local authority as well.
Thanks. And if you do have any questions, follow-on questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us after the presentation. You should be able to find our emails.
Thank you. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area in California, and my significant other is a professor of environmental studies and GIS at Santa Clara University. And his research right now is focused on extreme heat risk, specifically the built environment as a mediator of extreme heat risk in the San Francisco Bay Area. A couple of the applicants, so it's shockingly similar what they're doing in terms of the granularity of the data. He got his PhD at UCLA, which is where Alex Hall took the UN climate models down to the census parcel levels, the most kind of granular work that had been done at the time. But anyway, 2 applications that we're now exploring, either commercializing or making available, via other means, are home extreme heat vulnerability scores to be disclosed at the time a house is for sale and transacted. I also live in Portland, Oregon, half-time, where we have a home energy score that's required to be provided to prospective buyers of any piece of real estate. And I expect these kinds of disclosures, we all expect these kinds of disclosures, particularly where the risk of a property casualty is high due to extreme heat and wildfire, to increase over time. And then the other piece is to give direction to first responders in Santa Clara County is kind of where we're focused right now, to look out for, the work started with the unhoused. We're looking at, where are the unhoused concentrated, what kind of built environment are they drawn to as a function of their circumstances, and what, health and other risks do they face at a higher level due to extreme heat. And we've given first responders a lot of guidance as to where to go in the event of extreme heat events, because they're likely not going to get a call from somebody who's unhoused saying I need help, because they don't want to be hassled, they don't want to be disrupted. So there's just some ideas to think about the application for this kind of a thing, and I'll find a way to connect you to my partner CJ, because the work is just so strikingly similar. It's just a different geography.
Thank you. I don't know if Sarah has anything she wants to say. We'd love to be in touch, and I think it's really interesting to hear a perspective from somewhere like San Francisco, where you have more extreme heat events than us, I guess, although we did have 40 degrees in 2022. So the wildfire work is also really interesting as well.
Yeah, I agree. That's a fascinating approach, I think, in terms of the intended use of it and the application. So it's certainly something to consider. I mean, we've used exposure variable for the West Midlands as a function of population density. Now, obviously, I appreciate that doesn't necessarily take into account the people that you're referring to. So it's definitely something we can talk about and consider, because it is there's a similar situation there in Birmingham and in the West Midlands. We don't know where these unhoused people are and what their risks might be, but they may well be in areas that are of high risk that emergency services would benefit from that information. So thank you, that's really helpful and insightful.
Hello, thank you for that. It was very interesting. I'm wondering where you're looking to take this to next, in terms of, are you coming up with a set of recommendations and a policy to deal with the implications of that, and in particular whether you're looking at nature-based solutions as part of the framework?
Okay, thank you for such a great question, because at the end of this year, well, actually from this month moving forward, we're working on a large project with collaborators within Europe. There are 8 case study areas. One of them is Birmingham. It's brilliant to be able to take Birmingham to Europe, especially Especially, you've probably seen Birmingham in the news with a lot of, Birmingham is bankrupt. So it's really good to be able to go to Europe and talk about positive things that are happening within the city. And the particular project is looking at how we can embed nature-based solutions to deliver climate-resilient futures. So that's how we're taking it forward. Specifically, we're looking to see if we can improve the modelling of vegetation and climate interactions within the city, thinking about prospective future threats such as wildfires. And this will, on a local level, we're feeding into policy recommendations because we develop the work with the City Council, with the Combined Authority. And so these maps are part of the decisions they make already. And we will be taking that and seeing how it integrates with what other cities are doing in Europe and also European policy. Anything to add? No. Okay, thank you. Just while we're talking about nature-based solutions, you should check out the Trees and Design Action Group stand. It's number C42, and we have lots of excellent guidance documents on urban heat and managing urban water. Thank you. Anything else?
I was just going to add, I have got some leaflets that I can leave on the table if anyone wants to take one away. About
Sure.
WMAP.
And we will be around for the next few minutes, half an hour, so if you do want to come and talk to us, please do. We'd love to speak to you. Thank you very much.